Staying with the African conference, Garen touched on the Sharks result. The Lions Cheetahs, some nice running rugby as we've come to expect from those two sides against each other. The Lions just sneaking a win there. And then, of course, the late game, which many were sort of touting as the clash of the weekend, and it lived up to its billing. Nick Mallett, I saw even saying it looked like two Kiwi sides playing, just really good skill on show, great set piece from the Stormers.
Yes, that was very much a massive redeeming point of the South African weekend. The Cheetahs-Lions game sort of had some potential. You know, the teams seemed to have a sort of a willingness and a desire to sort of throw the ball around, but the mistakes were pretty appalling. There was just, you know, sort of timing issues, synergy issues. You could see that the Lions especially, I thought, were very disappointing in terms of looking quite jaded. And that's a problem they've got going forward, because they have lots of players who haven't had an off-season for, I think it's something like 3 years now, Garen, because they, quite a big batch of their players have had, I think, successive off-seasons playing in Japan, which means, you know, 2 off-seasons where they should have been sort of, you know, sitting on the beach or sitting next to the Val Dam, and not actually getting any mental time off rugby. And that's a bit of a problem for them. I know it's one thing to say the Japanese league is a little bit softer, you don't play as much, the intensity isn't the same, but you're still part of a rugby structure. It's not a healthy development that players are missing off-seasons, and it seemed to show. And playing on a heavy field didn't make things any easier, because the Lions love to play on a hard, firm surface. But there's been a lot of rain in Bloemfontein, and that pitch was unusually lush and sort of muddy, water just underneath the surface, and they looked very leaden-footed. So Johan Ackermann's going to have some big issues there in terms of rotating his players this season to make sure that he tries to keep a lot of those Japanese-based players as fresh as possible. So Newlands was the big redemption game. That was the one that really made us all put smiles on our dials after, you know, a slightly sort of despondent start to the South African weekend, if you like, looking at some of the other sides. But that game really stood apart. Nick Mallett's quite right. It did seem more like a New Zealand game. The quality and the intensity, the attacking desire was there for all to see. And 35,000, almost 35,000 people at Newlands, you know, if that sort of rugby is going to be seen consistently there, sort of almost like a province rugby, especially, you know, from the Stormers, then they'll be getting increasingly healthier gates as the season goes on. But let's not forget that it's only one match down. Plenty more to come, and they'll need to get into a regular winning habit to really start pulling in those kind of, you know, 45,000 plus crowds again.
Garen, what did you take from that final game of the weekend? Do you think that this Kiwi advisor for the Stormers has made a difference to the backline play, and was it a different brand on show?
Yeah. I was impressed by the Stormers. You know, they had a good pre-season. We expected big things from them. They'd roped in this Paul Feeney, I think his name is, from New Zealand to help with the skills. They got John Dobson rather in as to help with the breakdown. And I think it was clear from the first minute almost, especially in those first 40 minutes, how much the Stormers had improved from last year. So, you know, hats off to them. 24-0 at half time. That's quite a resounding one-sided first 40. The Bulls, for their part, I was a little bit disappointed in them. Again, they'd also had a good preseason. They'd beaten the Lions. They travelled all the way to Australia to play the Chiefs, ironically, and had beaten them as well. So I was expecting more from them. I was very disappointed in Andre Pollard. Granted, he'd been out for a full year, but I expected him only to be selected when he had actually been fairly fit, and he looked a yard short of pace at least. His leg heavily strapped still. We know he's got a shoulder injury as well. You know, everyone's talking about him being the saviour at flower for South Africa. Well, he'll certainly have to improve on that performance if he's going to get us, you know, to improve on our season from last year. And there were a couple of Bulls players that didn't really step up. Lut Diach, I thought, until he went off, didn't really feature much. You know, last year they had he and Eben Etzebeth had a bit of a fight. Everyone remembers that. You know, that matchup failed to materialise. I thought Jesse Creel at fullback was a little bit out of his depth, running around like a headless chicken, not really knowing where to go. I think he's better suited perhaps in the centre rather than at fullback. So they've got a lot to actually now work on. You know, they've got now head to Bloemfontein, I think, to play the Cheetahs, who were fairly unlucky against the Lions as well. That'll be a massive game to see what happens there. But, you know, getting back to the Stormers, we can't ask for much more. You know, they are now, the destiny, I guess, is in their hands in terms of their conference. The Bulls were expected to be their major opponents in that conference to win it. Obviously, we know that the winner of the conference gets a home quarterfinal. That's what everyone's playing for. They've still got all the New Zealand teams to play, but it's still fair on both, true to both rather. So the Stormers are one up, if you like. The return match against the Bulls at Loftus comes in the very last weekend. The conference could well be decided by then. So it's now in the Stormers' hands. I expect them to just sort of run with it and perhaps run away with that conference. They're playing some really good rugby if the first 80 minutes are anything to go by.